I will allocate some of my time to Senator Marshall, if that's okay.
1, 4.
5 and 3.
Fine, okay.
Minister, thank you for coming to the House today. As this bill passes through the House today, I'm mindful of the words of Dr. Michael Ryan of the World Health Organization that speed trumps perfection. And as such, I am sure that none of us here will want to impede the passage of this bill at this time. Firstly, I extend my sympathy to the families of those who have lost loved ones. To read some of the stories from people in the medical profession of people coming into hospital alone and dying alone, it is simply heartbreaking to see that sort of thing. But I think, in fairness to you, Minister, you have put it on the line for all of us what we can do to avoid that. I want to express my sincere gratitude to all working to keep this country going. Everybody from utility workers right through to those packing shelves, those collecting dustbins, those who are in frontline medical care. Without all of them, the country can't continue. There are some things that need to be put on the record today, and hopefully the lessons that we're learning now will stand the Oireachtas in the future, and we won't make the same mistakes a second time. It's amazing how some things that were deemed unconstitutional a mere few weeks ago are suddenly possible, such things as rent freezes. It's amazing how these things can happen in a crisis. But look, I'm not here to cast stones. I want to compliment the Government and the Minister for Finance on getting the main banks to agree to the terms they have agreed to for the duration of the crisis. There are some questions still to be answered, like, for example, where people are not paying the mortgage for 3 months are certainly going to have to repay the 3 months at the end of the crisis. Should it not be added on to the end of the mortgage? An additional 3 months, that type of thing. I want to congratulate the Garda Commissioner for the speed at which he acted to get members of the Gardaí out of Templemore and onto the streets. Clearly, when we see what has gone on with people spitting in the faces of elderly people and shouting COVID-19 as they run away, clearly we need a high Garda presence. Now, I want to deal specifically with the Defence Forces, which I'm sure is no surprise to you, Minister. Clearly, we're in a situation where the chickens have come home to roost. The neglect of the Defence Forces and the failure to have proper retention policies in place has caused the situation where we're now looking for veterans to come back. At the outset, let me point out that I've always had some difficulty with the fact that the Secretary-General of the Department of Defence and the Chief of Staff are not regarded as peer equals when it comes to the development of defence policy. And when it comes to military advice, the Chief of Staff and the Chief of Staff alone should be the only person offering such advice. With respect to the Defence Forces, once again, they've shown, regardless of the crisis and personal dangers they put themselves in, they're ready, willing and able to stand up to the plate. I want to thank the Chief of Staff and wish him and his charge luck as they go forward. I want to congratulate the crew of the Samuel Beckett in Dublin, the WB Yates in Galway and the Etna in Cork for their speedy reactions to be in place. I want to thank the Army for supporting the Naval Service in those 3 areas, and particularly I'm mindful of my former colleagues in the Céad Cot in Doonamalitha in Galway who are spread throughout the country. Minister, I have tabled a number of amendments with respect to how the operational decisions will be made with respect to this legislation. I'm mindful of the fact that the legislation has to get through today, and I will not be pressing the amendments to a vote. However, what I am saying now is I'm putting on the record I see references to the Minister will make this decision or the Minister's opinion. Surely the Minister's opinions or decisions should be based on advice from the Chief of Staff, and most of my amendments relate to the advice required by the Chief of Staff. We cannot have politicians making decisions about operational issues within the Defence Forces. Minister, the military service allowance was discussed yesterday in the Dáil. Currently we have recruits and apprentices and cadets operating in frontline services in the military. Unless we are going to pay them the military service allowance, I am asking you today to take them out of service and put them back into training where they belong. Student nurses have been paid and there has been no difficulty with that. So let's treat the Defence Forces in the same esteem as we're treating the health services. The pension abatement issue I have referred to yourself and the Taoiseach. We cannot be expecting veterans to come back and abate their pensions at the same time. A pension is a property right, and that has been established for members of this House many, many times. We cannot continue to penalise members of the Defence Forces who put themselves forward to serve this country at a time of crisis. The period of re-enlistment, I heard the Minister yesterday refer to a 6-month period up to 3 years. Minister, the period of re-enlistment can be for no longer than the crisis requires it to be, and members or veterans who return to the uniform at the request or at the need of the state need to be able to leave immediately this crisis is over and go back to their own jobs. More importantly, they need their jobs protected. My colleague Cathal Berry yesterday in the Dáil protected the employment of those in the RDF with the amendment that was passed in the Dáil. I would ask that you consider and make a statement today, Minister, that those who return to the PDF and wish to go back to their civilian employment, their employment will be protected by the state. And finally, the Reserve Defence Forces. Minister, the Reserve Defence Forces, as you well know, are available to this state 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would like to see them utilised in this crisis. There are many highly skilled people there, ready, willing and waiting to come back. I'm sure that decision is with the Chief of Staff, and I'm sure he'll take that.